All right, here we go. I don't even know if we could call this an emergency podcast because we knew it was coming all day. The NFL schedule release is here, so we have the full Kansas City Chiefs 17-game schedule. We now know dates and times. My name is Pete Sweeney. I'm the editor-in-chief of ArrowheadPride.com, joined once again by my esteemed deputy editor, John Dixon, my Arrowhead Pride podcast producer, Steven Serta, and our lead analyst, Ron Kopp. And we have the full schedule. Everyone has it. In years past, I have read it out loud. I'm not going to read it out loud. You know what it is. You've accessed it. You've seen it. I think we
I
can
gotta read all 17 weeks.
No, I think we can forego that. We are just going to come straight to you with our rapid reaction of this thing. I'm going to start with mine, and then we'll go around the circle here. Well, let's go clockwise. So let's see. I got to point this way, the way the camera is. I will go to Ron first, followed by John, and to Steve. I think the schedule is a little bit different than years past. We had mentioned the rules of broadcasts and channels holding different rights to different games, and it seemed like they were really leaning into the better teams of the league. And I think you see that with the Kansas City Chiefs. I wrote this on Twitter. When Andy Reid came to the Chiefs, Kansas City was playing 10 noon games a year, only had the 2 primetime games. I know that Chiefs fans were starved for primetime. I imagine tonight it is the opposite because there's only 2 noon games on the schedule, a maximum of 5 primetime games. They don't even count opening night. So that's 6 primetime games. The Chiefs can get 2 more. No early morning at Arrowhead rolling in at noon. And one of the noon games is on Christmas Day. So I don't even really know if you could count that on a Monday. So in reality, that normal noon game that you're used to, that noon game, there's only one of those all year, and you get it in week 2 against the Jaguars, and it's just an incredible, I think, turn of events, and just a sign of what Andy Reid has done in Kansas City. And look, when you're the reigning Super Bowl champions, the networks that have this free for all now are going to want you in their later slots, and what that leads to is Kansas City playing at late times. Most of the games 3:25 or later, and we'll see if they even get flexed from some of those games into the prime time. Ron, we'll go to you first. I said we were going to go clockwise. What was your general reaction to the schedule?
Well, I mean, I'll say it first. I mean, I have a little beef with some of the primetime schedule. I can't believe the Lions are the week 1 opponent. I'm going to come out and say I know we've known that for a little bit now, but I mean, my gosh, they have so many different opponents they could have chose from to have a huge game in Arrowhead that first week. I know everyone loves the Lions this year. They're going to be good. Hey, I know, restore the roar, right? Hashtag restore the roar. But I first of all, Jameson Williams suspended the first 6 games, so they're not even going to have their kind of first round whiteout.
Well, that plays into the advantage. That plays into the advantage, Ron, right? Isn't that?
Well, that's my problem. Is
you don't think the Sun God's a good player? You don't like Amon-Ra St. Brown?
That's my problem, though, guys. I feel like the Lions are going to come into Arrowhead and get walloped. And I know the Texans did. The last time the Chiefs had a Super Bowl banner to unveil as well. But at least the Texans felt like, hey, Deshaun Watson. It was a playoff matchup before. Big game, even though they weren't that good that year. The Lions will be good this year. I'm a believer in the Lions. I just feel like they could have made it the Eagles. They could have made it the Bills, the Bengals. I mean, so many different opponents that would have been such a more high-profile game. But I do think, Pete, what you said about like the network kind of having that free-for-all now probably played a part in this, right? I think maybe having those Eagles, Bills, Bengals games more available to the the CBS's, Fox's, all the other ones, rather than just pinning it to the opening night, knowing that everyone's going to be watching opening night either way, right? It's going to happen no matter who you put out there. So I that plays into a little bit, but I do have beef with that being the week 1 game. That was my big thing.
I think this is the new strategy of the NFL, because you look at the schedule and you see a Super Bowl rematch that's on the schedule. You see the Buffalo Bills come into town. You see the Cincinnati Bengals, and those are all games that you'd be like, well, wow, what a way to start the NFL season, right, with this exclamation point. But I think the NFL is saying, well, people are going to watch these games anyway. Let's get a new, exciting team. They did the same thing last year. Like, the Bills are a really good and up-and-coming team, and they're knocking at the door of being an AFC contender, but they have no rivalry with the Los Angeles Rams, right? There's no juice to Chiefs and Lions. And so I think the Chiefs see a team in the Lions that a lot of people are going to be picking to finally break through to the playoffs. Their offense, if you look at some of the analytics, was really actually close to the Chiefs last year. Their defense stunk, which is why they were 9-8 and didn't make the postseason. They feel like they maybe improved that this offseason. So we'll see. I tend to agree. John had our DraftKings spread article today, and the Chiefs, I believe, opened as touchdown favorites. John, I'm going to give you the floor in just a second. Let's go through the primetime games really quickly for our podcast listeners. You mentioned the Chiefs opening the season against the Lions at 7:20 p.m. The next primetime game, week 4, at New York or New Jersey. They're playing the New York Jets. We think, let's not jinx it here, we're finally going to get Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. 2 weeks later, week 6, 7:15 on Amazon Prime. This is Thursday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. This one can't get flexed out, Russ, even if you guys are 0-5. So the Chiefs will be heading to, or they will stay at Arrowhead and play Denver on Thursday Night Football. That is after a game against the Vikings on Sunday. Week 7 is the Chargers. This is 2 back-to-back. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That is not a primetime game. They do play the Chargers next game. Their next primetime game's right after the bye week. After week 10, they host the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football, 7:15 p.m. Eagles fans know about Andy Reid after the bye week well, so do Chiefs fans. That might play into the advantage of that game, but you always knew that Chiefs-Eagles was going to be on prime time one way or another, so you get it after the bye. You have to wait till November 20th for that game. A couple weeks later, it is the Packers, which was a little bit surprising now that they don't have Aaron Rodgers, but that game will be played at Lambeau Field on Sunday Night Football. And then 2 weeks later after that, week 15, the Chiefs' final primetime game of the year at New England, and that is another Monday Night Football game that occurs at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. So you end up having 2 Monday Night Football games on this schedule. You have the 2 Sunday Night Football games, the Thursday Night Football game against the Broncos, and of course opening night. And who knows, the Chiefs were flexed out last year when they played the Broncos. We'll see if that happens later on in the season. I know that a lot of people were pointing to that Packers game, where maybe if the Packers and Jordan Love don't pan out, the Chiefs could be flexed out of that game. But there's a number of games on the back end of that schedule where they could be flexed in. So you're looking at possibly 8 night games for the Chiefs, almost half the schedule, John, as we look at it. What is your general reaction to the schedule?
Well, I wrote a story a couple months ago about how for the first time ever, you weren't going to know which network was going to carry the game. The Chiefs have been carried primarily by CBS for many years. And this year it's a free-for-all. They're not following any rhyme or reason. It could be any network. And look what's happened. All of the games, except for the primetime games, are CBS games, except for one Fox game. I think this actually has more CBS games on it in this free-for-all mode than we've had for a long time. Usually there have been a couple of Fox games on the schedule. I haven't gone back to look at it yet, but so far this is much ado about nothing. We're back to seeing almost all of the Chiefs games on CBS, even though they're supposed to be all over the place, and I find that kind of surprising. I really don't have a big problem with the Lions opening the season. I think it's going to be an interesting game. And so I really don't have a big problem with it. And I think that the league is doing exactly what they want to do, which is recognize that the game is going to have a big audience anyway. It's the only show in town. And why waste one of these big draws from later in the season? Or I think almost even worse, and I alluded to this on the editor's show the other day, and I don't think I expressed it very well. I think it's better to have a game between big dogs in the conference, like the Bengals and the Bills later in the season. So if it has a big impact on the playoff race, it doesn't happen in week 1 or week 2. And all season, that is the shadow that falls over both teams, however it plays out. So I think this is a pretty good schedule. I don't see a section of it to me looks like a really difficult 5-game stretch or an easy 5-game stretch. It all looks kind of up and down all the way through. I think this is going to be a good schedule for the Chiefs.
I think you make a good point, John, about the division games and really that final stretch where you see the last 5 games of the year are Bills, Patriots, Raiders, Bengals, Chargers. Now, of course, there's 2 division games there, but I think the strategy over the past couple of years had been, let's have as many division games as possible at the end of the schedule so that they're interesting. Now you're seeing a little bit of a shift, I think, in really identifying the contenders here, right? So you see that the Chiefs get the Bills later in the season. I believe last year that was in that first part of the year. You see the Bengals, and should the teams pan out where they want to go, and should the rivalry remain as strong as it's been, that could be a pretty good game at the end of the year. You mentioned all the CBS games, and as someone who works for KSHB 41, this is a 3-game schedule as far as I'm concerned. We don't have to worry about it. No, just kidding. But yeah, it is something where, and it's worth noting, this is, you're going to have to check the channel, because every week in a way it's random, especially if they're not at night, right, where the games are the same channel every time that they are at night, either be on Thursday, Sunday, or Monday. Steve, your general reaction to the schedule?
So I mean, a couple more noon games would be nice. That's a big thing for me. I love a good noon kickoff, and cover the Chiefs, get done, watch football. But it is what it is. I'm actually excited about the Germany game. That early start, I think, is going to be awesome. I'll actually dig that on Sunday. But overall, I think that they did a really good job of spreading this thing out. Like, I don't think that there's any point in the schedule where you're necessarily like, man, they're in a really down part of the schedule. Like, there's never more than a couple of games where you're like, oh, the Chiefs are easily going to go on that stretch and rattle off 5 games in a row or something like that. Like, it is pretty spread out, which is nice considering last season when we talked about like the first 8 weeks of the season, how that was projected based on the previous year. It was insane. And this, I actually think, is really set up nicely for the Chiefs. Like, the Lions week 1, Jaguars, Bears, Jets through the first 4 weeks. I actually think that's great, because all of those teams have a chance to be good and be dramatically improved on last season. So playing them early in the season is good for the Chiefs while they're still figuring things out and trying to figure out how the new pieces fit together and who they are as teams and stuff like that, whereas Kansas City knows exactly who they are. So I think that actually works out really well for the Chiefs that first 4 weeks, playing those teams so early. And then, getting the Super Bowl rematch week 11 on Monday Night Football, that's going to be an awesome game. That's going to be an incredible game. And we know the Eagles are going to be really good again. So I'm super excited about that. And then I'm happy that they actually put the Bills a little later in the season, because they've played them a couple years in a row now, super early in the year. And it seems like it's a totally different story once we get to the postseason than it was when the Chiefs played the Bills early in the season. So I'm excited to have those matchups with the Bills and the Bengals at the end of the season, because they're going to be AFC powerhouses that are trying to compete for Super Bowls.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And what I find really interesting, really, about the whole schedule is just the fact that there are, and let me make sure that I'm making this point correctly as I look at it here, but there are no, okay, so we got the one primetime game against the Broncos, but that's it as far as division primetime games. I almost thought that there were 0, but you get the Thursday Night Football game against the Broncos as the only division primetime game. Very different than last year, where I think the schedule makers really were leaning into the AFC West, thinking that it was going to be this great division. We all did. And now you're seeing them lean into other teams as the primetime opponents. There is an odd part of the schedule, I thought, and let's just talk about that for a second. Week 6, you get the Broncos, that primetime game that I was just talking about that happens on Amazon on Thursday night. The next week, the Chiefs end up playing the Chargers. That's 10 days later at Arrowhead. And then the Chiefs are going right back to Denver and playing the Broncos for 2 times in 3 weeks. Ron, I see you're shaking your head. What do you make of that?
Yeah, no, it is funny, because last year, and we were kind of talking about it, last year the Broncos games were both like, I think, week 14 and after. And so this year they wanted to squeeze them early and together. But 3 straight division games after kind of what I thought was kind of a funny part of the schedule too was kind of an odd schedule or odd start to the schedule in terms of opponents. You kind of have a lot of, some NFC teams, some kind of AFC teams that obviously Jets and Jaguars will be good, but, kind of just aren't the usual opponents. And then all of a sudden you have 3 straight division games. So it is kind of odd, but Denver with Sean Payton, they're going to be a talk of the town kind of team. So they probably do want them, with the Chiefs early before they kind of bow out like they did last year.
That's the NFL just being like, yeah, we're not playing with the Broncos this year because they were mad about how it worked out last season. Like, you're supposed to be a contending team, and that's what you put on the field.
Yeah. I think they were looking at that Week 6 Thursday night game and saying, well, the worst they're going to be is 2-3 at that point, right? They're not going to be they can't be any worse than 1-4. I mean, at least it would still, I think, have something that matters to Denver. Even if they have another down year, there is still the storyline of, can Denver finally beat Kansas City, which they haven't done in quite some time. All right, let's get to the second part of our podcast. Steve, we're going to go back to you. So now we're going to go counterclockwise. What is your favorite matchup on this schedule?
I can only pick one, right? Because I don't want to step on anybody else's matchups. There's a lot here. I think that. Okay, I'm gonna go with the weird one. It's gonna be Week 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh wow!
The only non-Christmas Day noon game on the schedule.
That's why Serta loves it. Yeah,
the noon kickoff is part of it. We already talked about that, but no, I just think that this Jaguars team is ascending, and I think that Trevor Lawrence is gonna be really good, and they improved, and I think they had a decent draft class, and they're going to have Calvin Ridley in the mix, who, like, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram and all those guys were great last year for Jacksonville, but they didn't have a guy that was close to the caliber of Calvin Ridley. And I know he had to sit out a season, but as long as that guy's healthy, Doug Peterson's going to dial up tons of stuff for him, and he's going to be an incredible player for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm just pretty high on Jacksonville, and I thought about picking Week 1, which I'm sure no one else will pick, so I'm not stepping up on anybody else's matchup. But like, I kind of feel the same about the Lions, but like Ron said, Jameson Williams isn't going to be there. It's not going to be quite what I think that Lions team can be later on in the year. Yes. And I have a lot of faith in Jacksonville really competing in the AFC South this year. So I think that's like a sneaky, really, really good game in Week 2 in one of their only noon kickoffs.
Yeah, I like the Jaguars pick. As I'm talking out loud, like, how rare is it that you play every team during the regular season that you played in the postseason last year? It's pretty. Ooh. I mean, that has to be crazy. Very rare. I think the idea that the Chiefs are usually the team with the bye week helps, right? If you're only playing 3 teams, it's more likely for you to do that. But that is something to keep in mind. I mean, those 3 weeks, I know that it doesn't matter to the Chiefs fans because everybody was so transfixed on the Jaguars and then beating not the Jaguars, the Bengals, and then beating the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Jacksonville is going to be looking at that game and saying, look, we were in the playoffs, right? And they were in that game. Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to think about. I think part of that was Patrick Mahomes and his injury, but those 3 games are going to be games that are going to be marked on these 3 team schedules and saying, okay, we can in a way avenge our playoff losses there.
That Week 2 game could be an announcement game for Jacksonville. Like, if they pull off an upset over the Chiefs, they're saying, yeah, we belong here. We belong in this conversation.
Steve and I, in another life, wanted to go to Jacksonville at one point. We called it Power Hour to Saxonville for all you deep cut fans.
Duval.
All right, John. Let's go to you and see what your favorite game on the schedule is.
Well, I was amused by Steve saying that he didn't pick the Lions because he didn't think he knew no one else would take it. Well, that's my pick. I think this is
greedy with the picks, man.
There was like a 1% chance anybody was going to pick Lions.
Well, that figures that's the one I would choose. But I think this, as I said before, I think this is a very interesting game. And the Lions really came on at the end of the season last year. They were 8-2 to close the season. And I think you've got to give a lot of respect to a team that starts 1-6 and then finishes 8-2. I can think of several Andy Reid teams that did that and earned my respect. And so when I see another team do it, I think, okay, we should be paying attention to what they're doing. And your points about it are exactly right. I think it was Steve that made these points, and Ron did too, that they're going to be missing some pieces, and they're still a new team, and there could be some stuff that that's not going to come back like it did last year. But I think this is a real interesting team, and I think they could surprise us. It could be a very good game, and or then again, the Chiefs could just wallop them. You just never know in the first week of the season, no matter who the teams are anyway. But I to me, this looks like a very interesting game, and I have a second place if no one else picks it later.
All right, good to know. I think that you're right, and I think it is worth saying there's no sleeping on the Lions. If you think about Chiefs' recent history, they had quite the night on a banner night when they went to New England, and Kareem Hunt went crazy, and all of a sudden, I know it was pre-Mahomes, I believe, right? But the Chiefs announced themselves, I think, as a franchise, like we're here to stay, that type of thing. And then you saw what they were able to build in the ensuing years. All right, Ron, let's go to you and find out your top game here.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick on the Lions. I'm going to be rooting for the Lions this year. I love the Lions
in week one, Ron. Your turn.
But not in week one.
Okay, all right.
But no, it's to me they're just the kind of team that shouldn't have that prime time slot yet, right? I think this year should have been the year that they kind of build into it, make the playoffs, and then next year maybe they're the team that you put in that situation. I just feel like it may be too big of a spot for them, and then it just may end up not being a good game. I'm predicting that. But my game, I'm gonna go. I can't remember who said this earlier, but I think it was you, Pete. I'm gonna go with the Bills. Kind of what you mentioned with that being later in the season. That's not been the case with these games. For some reason, the Chiefs and Bills, if you look at the recent regular season matchups, it has always been in the first half of the year, kind of early in the season when things are, not as important, right? I mean, obviously it is important, but the Bills have beaten the Chiefs early in the season, before, and the Chiefs have ended up with the higher seed at the end of it. Week 14, there's not a lot of wiggle room at that point. If they have similar records and the Bills do upend the Chiefs there, that could be, the difference between the 1 and the 2 seed. Same with the Bengals, obviously, but I just like that Bills matchup being a little later, in the cold at Arrowhead rather than kind of that nice weather. It's been October, September when they've played. I like the Bills game being later. And again, I think the Bills are just going to be up there again as one of the top contenders. I think they're just that kind of team. So it'll be a huge game.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick either as well. I mean, I just think that final stretch with the Patriots, who always seem to find a way to be at least somewhat relevant, and the Bengals and the Bills really just being in that final stretch of the season mixed in with the AFC West makes for an interesting end of the year. I like the Dolphins in Germany. I just think it's such a cool idea that the Chiefs are going to Germany. Man, I love that Tyreek Hill, wanted to see all like his quote unquote ex-girlfriend and doesn't get to do so now. He has to go to Germany. He's like a college guy that's like going to where he thinks his girl's going to be, and she's just not there. And he's so disappointed. He has to like end up being disappointed here. But I just think, man, it's so cool that the game is growing right here. And we're seeing right here at Arrowhead Pride, Tom and Brad are just rabid Chiefs fans. They've grown a following here through our podcast network, and now it's extending to other countries as well. And I think the NFL is just going to start to take off more worldwide. I mean, we see how big European football, soccer is across the world. And I think the fact that they're injecting good teams over there now, over to different countries is really going to help. And I think it's cool that the Chiefs have these countries. I know that it's Germany, Mexico, John, Switzerland, Austria, right, are the Chiefs countries. So cool that the NFL is doing this. I know that fans are not thrilled that they won't get a home game out of this, but I think it helps the fact that you're alternating AFC, NFC, where you get 9 games. And what I would tell Chiefs fans who are disappointed about this, I get the whole Tyreek Hill thing. That probably was a once in a lifetime thing, unless the Dolphins were to make the playoffs and see the Chiefs and whatever. Because I know that Tyreek has said that he wants to retire, eventually. But I just think this will be more the norm moving forward. Like, I think this is just the beginning of what's going to be the norm of, like, if your team has 9 home games that year, I think eventually the NFL is going to be going overseas a lot. So I think cool that the Chiefs are spearheading this, John. And I'll go to you because you're our token historian here. This was really a thing that Lamar Hunt would probably appreciate. I mean, if we were guessing, right?
I think you would, and I think you're making a really good point that, and I get why people are upset about this, but you're exactly right though, Pete. We're giving up the ninth home game of the season. Compared to years past, the Chiefs aren't really giving anything up. Chiefs fans who are season ticket holders aren't really giving anything up. They're still going to get 8 home games. And if we just for a moment assume that the reports that we had before schedule release day that the Chiefs are going to play overseas again in 2024 and be a road team, well, that also is a game that where there's going to be 9 on the schedule because
Right.
the AFC has 9 games one year and the next year the NFC has 9 games. And I think what they're going to plan on doing here is arranging it so that the team that has the extra home game on its schedule are the ones who will be home teams when they're playing in Europe or in some other country, some other international game. So I think the issue about the home games isn't going to be as big a deal as fans have made it out to be now that there are 17 games in the schedule. So that's one thing. And you're exactly right that we're getting more and more fans from around the world, which is fantastic. It grows the league. It's kind of a good thing that we as Americans can show the rest of the world. As Americans, there's a lot of stuff that goes on here that we would not like to take elsewhere in the world. But this is something that we can be proud of. This is our game. We thought of this. We made it happen, turned it into what it is today, and we want the rest of the world to see it. Just like other countries embraced baseball back in the 20th century. And I'll just say one more thing too. We on the editor's show and already in this podcast, I see you're talking about these noon games and the lack of them being a problem for us, which it is, but it isn't all. But it isn't all about us. And
Sure.
One of the things that strikes me about this schedule is that this is going to be a fantastic schedule for our primary audience at arrowheadpride.com, which is people who live elsewhere who are Chiefs fans.
Right.
Because all of these games are going to be available nationally. Well, not all of them, but almost all of them, which means that you're not going to have to go to the bar to see the game or go through, go to your friend's house that's got Amazon or, it's not going to be as much of a struggle to see the Chiefs. And it's only because the Chiefs are really good. So, you folks who are living outside of the Kansas City area, and sometimes have had trouble watching Chiefs games, you're not going to have as much trouble this year. And I think you should enjoy it while you can, because it's not always going to be this way. But for a number of years now, I think it's going to be. So enjoy it while you can.
Well, I also think that it's an announcement that the Chiefs are arrived. Like they have arrived. Like,
yeah.
If you look at the NBA, I know not everyone is NBA fans, but the same teams are always playing on Christmas. And, I know that some fans get upset about that, but like, why are the same teams always playing on Christmas? It's because they are the teams that are going to draw eyeballs. And everybody knows that Patrick Mahomes is the biggest draw in the NFL. And now they're putting him in a position where he can be seen, as you were alluding to, John, by not only Chiefs fans that are everywhere as far as the Chiefs kingdom extends, but really, I just think general NFL fans of sport will get to see the Chiefs, and they've just made their mark as clearly the benchmark. And I think that is something to remember from a competitive standpoint as well. If there was ever a year, I think that teams are going to be wanting to beat the Chiefs. Not only did they win a championship, not only have they won 2 championships now in 4 years, but everyone saw the draft with Mahomes raising that trophy and Travis Kelce dancing around and saying, all right. And Clark Hunt rolling out those 3 Lombardis or replica Lombardis or whatever. And not only, our team's going to be gunning for them, but everybody is going to be watching. And look, this is where Chiefs fans for lifetimes have wanted to be. People didn't think they'd ever get to see this. And this schedule, I think, is a reflection of where the organization is
Agreed.
at this point. All right, let's do this exercise that we did last year. I don't even remember what we did last year as far as what record we had. I think we might have had the record right. I wish we would have, Steve, I wish we would have thought to go back, and I think we got to 14-3.
I think you're right, Pete. If
I'm not
my memory
mistaken.
recalls, yeah.
But we're going to do this exercise again. We're going to go back to clockwise. Ron, you know what I'll have you do, since there's 9 games before the bye. I'll have you quickly evaluate. We're going to do pseudo quickly evaluate the first 5 games, and the next 3 of us will take 4, and we'll come up with a first Chiefs record prediction. I know, Ron, by the way, for you hardcore Arrowhead Pride readers that are making it to minute 30 of our podcast, Ron's going to go through the schedule tomorrow and come up with a better record. But this is a group exercise, the first record prediction for your 2023 Kansas City Chiefs. Ron, take the first 5 games.
Oh, I love it. Okay, because I already kind of mentioned earlier that these first 5 games are a little funky to me. Just when you look at the opponents, there's 3 NFC opponents. The Jaguars and the Jets, again, are just both, not the typical teams that the Chiefs are playing, because they're not typically division winners or, kind of up top where they have to play them every year. So I kind of like that. I like having the diversity. Lions, already told you guys, they're going 1-0. I already mentioned that. But I'm kind of with Serta here on how interesting the Jaguars game is. And I think this is going to be a kind of a spot for them to maybe let down. So I'm going to go ahead and say 1-1 off the bat.
Whoa.
They lose in Jacksonville. Yeah, Dougie P gets the boys going. They want to get the old
undefeated no more after 1 week. Those Instagrams that the NFL makes where like the logos still lit up.
And you guys can thank me because we don't have to have the pressure of continuing to go undefeated the entire year. But 1-1, but I do think they bounce back. Bears week 3, Jets Sunday Night Football. In New York, that's going to be a fun game. But Chiefs definitely win that, I think, and then the Vikings as well. So I have them going 4-1 to start the season. That Jaguars game just trips them up a little bit. Jacksonville gets revenge from last year. That was a closer game in the playoffs than the score might have told us.
All right, John. So as I'm computing here, you know how good I am at math. We are at 4-1, and you will continue. Right?
We lost John.
We lost John. Oh, there he is.
He's back. Okay, he switched. We're not counterclockwise. Just for everyone that realizes this. Oh no, now we are. Steve's on it. All right, we're back to counterclockwise. We're 4-1. John, you pick up now at week 6. It's the Broncos and Chiefs on Thursday Night Football at Arrowhead. We don't have him.
We can't hear you.
We don't have his.
I think we don't have his mic connection when he dropped.
All right, Steve. Let's go to you for week 6 and see if John can get his audio back at some point.
So I'm week 6. What through 9?
Week 6 through 9. Yes.
Okay. Broncos Thursday Night Football. Chiefs aren't losing to the Broncos at home on Thursday Night Football. Like, it's just not going to happen. I don't care about the Sean Payton effect. Chargers, I'm a little bit skeptical on, because I do think that they got better this offseason. I still don't think they're better than the Chiefs, but how competitive they play against the Chargers over the last couple of years, I feel like they could easily drop one of those games this year. So I think it's probably going to be that early season one. And then you travel to Denver. They're going to beat the Broncos. And then I think the Dolphins matchup in Germany is going to be a really exciting game, a really entertaining game. I don't think that Miami's got the defense to stop Patrick Mahomes in any way. So I think that the Chiefs are going to come away victorious at Frankfurt Stadium in Germany.
Okay, so good job by Steve changing on the fly and taking the second quarter of the year. These aren't quarters because they're 17. You can't cut 17 in 4 quarters, but the second quarter of the year. So the Chiefs are 7-2 entering the bye after Germany. John, now you have the third quarter of the season, and you start with week 11 out of the bye, Monday Night Football, Chiefs and Eagles Super Bowl rematch.
Well, coming out of the bye week, I think you have to take Andy Reid, no matter who you're playing, even if it's the team you faced in the Super Bowl the year before. So I'm going to say the Chiefs will win that game. I think they'll beat the Raiders. I was going to say, if I had an opportunity to pick another team for an interesting matchup, would be the Broncos, because I'm not sure where they're going to go. I think Steve is convinced that the Chiefs are going to win both of those games, and they very well could, but that could go either way. I'm the other way around. I think the Raiders are the team that's really in trouble in the AFC West. So I think the Chiefs will win that game easily. Then we get the Packers. I just don't see them being much of a competitor this year, and I could be way wrong. Jordan Love could surprise us when he's got the full support of the team, but I still think the Chiefs are going to win that game on the road. And then we go to the Bills.
Yeah, John, you have 10-2 now going into this Bills game. And this was brought to my attention today. The Bills will actually be coming off a bye week heading into this Chiefs game. So I don't know if that changes.
Didn't know that was happening. Well,
yeah,
that would be a game. If I had to pick in these four of a game to lose, that would be it. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the Bills winning that game there.
All right. If I'm not mistaken here, we're 10-3, right? Yes.
Mhm.
So we're 10-3 entering the final 4 games. Chiefs going to New England. Mac Jones is not beating Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he just isn't. I understand the Patriots are trying to build something new there. They finally have an offensive coordinator, so that's 11-3. The Chiefs then host the Raiders and then the Bengals. We haven't dropped a division game yet, right? Or did we drop the Chargers?
Yes,
we lost one division game. Yeah.
I see. I don't think they're losing the Raiders either. So that's 12-3 for me. Cincinnati. So here's my take on Cincinnati. I think that yes, Cincinnati is going to be ultra motivated to win this because they lost last year. But there is still, I think, a slight caveat of the Chiefs not beating Cincinnati during the regular season under the Joe Burrow era. So I think they're going to be motivated to win this game. And I think it's at home. And I think this is like a solidified game. And man, Chris Jones, I watched him say Burrowhead 3 times before the AFC title game. They're not forgetting about all that. I think there's going to be a lot of motivation there. I think it's going to be a big game. And I think the Chiefs are going to be happy that it's at home. So I think they win that one too. So now we're at 13-3, and I don't think 13-3 gets done in the AFC. So I don't think this is going to be a game where the Chiefs are necessarily resting folks. I like the Chargers next up in the division this year. I know that we gave them the earlier game, I believe, right? So I think it's a split. So by default, I think the Chargers are taking one. So if you would have given the win earlier, I probably would have given the loss here. So that ends up being 13-4 for the record, which I think, you know what? We did a pretty nice job, I think, being honest with each other on this podcast.
Well, and I'll just say, before we started, I went down the row and I picked different games, but I also came up with 13-4. Just doing it myself. So
I think we're 14-3, aren't we? I think we're 14-3.
Yeah.
You didn't pick a loss, Pete, did you?
No,
they're going 4-0 down the stretch. So.
I had warned you guys about my mathematics skills. Nobody spoke up as I was announcing the final. So
You're right. So we picked one fewer game than I did when I went down.
I believe our losses were to the Jags, and then the next loss was to the Chargers, and then we gave the Bills that game. So those were the 3 losses we have. So 14-3 again. But in the way that we were talking, we feel, I think, 13-14 teetering along that line, depending on how things go. Which, look, in the Andy Reid Mahomes era, is right around, the right area to be.
Well, I was going to say too. I mean, and speaking of that, I mean, they always finish the season strong, regular season strong for the most part. I mean, they usually do go into the postseason on some sort of run. So I do think it makes sense that they finish that last 4 stretch strong.
All right.
If they lose to the Bills, they're going to go 4-0 to finish.
Yeah.
That would be another way to put that. Yeah.
They do. You know what is always true too, and kudos to you, Ron, for recognizing this. Ever since Andy Reid got here, and this predates Mahomes, there was always that game in the first part of the season where you're like, how the hell did the Chiefs lose this game? And so the Jaguars makes sense.
It's usually in October, I will say, but
it's
usually in October.
Couldn't you see them just easily rolling through the Jaguars, Bears, and Jets and being like, oh, you know what we're going to do today? We're going to lose to Kirk Cousins right here in week 4, and just start 3-1.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson
we got to get that bad loss
200
out of the way.
3 touchdowns.
And then they recalibrate and rip what was the stat? They've had like five game winning streaks in a row, or a 5-game winning streak ever since Andy Reid has been here in the season, which is like just incredible. So yeah, I mean, the ebbs and flows of the NFL season. We have the full schedule for you up at arrowheadpride.com. I gave you the biggest game on the schedule, what I felt was the biggest game, and some instant analysis. So check that out. John, I believe tomorrow is going to have the best and worst games of the NFL season. Ron is going to examine these games and go in and find a proper record. And I believe, on Andy Reid. He's doing the rounds right now, talking about the NFL schedule on ESPN and NFL Network. So check that all out at arrowheadpride.com. Steve's got our Arrowhead Pride podcast network up and going here. Appreciate Ron, appreciate John, appreciate Steve, appreciate you for checking out Arrowhead Pride live here on the interwebs and on the Arrowhead Pride podcast network. My name is Pete Sweeney. Thank you for joining us for schedule release night.